Hey, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you all could be here. Alongside Jan is with me. And from what I understand, Jan, there is something that you really miss that you would like to share with all of us.
I really, really miss. By the way, hi Steve. Hi everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate seeing every one of you, and thanks for having me here, Steve.
Mhm.
A lot of times I watch a lot of classic TV shows, and I get a kick out of a lot of things. But I noticed the little things that I missed in my lifetime that I kind of remember growing up with, and there are a lot of things today that they're no longer. For example, let's say that somebody on a classic TV show is having a dispute on the telephone with someone, for example, and they get all upset and their feathers are ruffled, and all of a sudden, what did they do? Boom! They smash down the phone, and then they pick it up, and they go tapping this thing, trying to reconnect the call. I miss the fun. I know this sounds really weird, Steve. I miss the fun of like just being able to like literally like hang up a phone, Steve. That's one of the things I miss because of today's technology. You see, know what it is, Steve, and anyone watching. I'm 65, okay? So part of me is living in modern times. Of course, I've adapted. I wouldn't have a show on a platform like this if I didn't learn how to maneuver the computer and all this and all that. But a part of me still has one leg also in the olden days where part of me is like kind of reminiscent. And Steve, if I might mention another thing that I miss the good old days in terms of this when there were like telephone booths in the street. Why do I miss that instead of having a cell phone on me all the time? Well, it's like back in the day, for example, if I said, I'm going to go for a walk and I'll be back in 2 hours. And back in the good old days, I was not to be reached. Okay. So I kind of missed that little bit of anonymity. But what I would do, of course, say, but I'll call you later. And I would go to a payphone and say, how's everything? Everything all right? Do you need anything at the store? That's that little bit of a part of me that's a little bit sentimental about stuff like that. But then again, Steve and anyone watching, I'm also in conflict because if there's like a situation where I really need to reach someone like really fast, I could do that just by taking out my phone and being able to do that. So for me, Steve, something about the electronics of yesteryear, I kind of miss. I'm sort of like still ambivalent about it. That's pretty much what I miss. I'm sure I miss a lot more than that. Oh, there's another thing I do miss before I forget, and I'm sure Steve may agree. But Steve, you're kind of on the youngish side, but I think you might remember busy signals. Like if I wanted to take the telephone off the hook, like just leave me alone for an hour, just take it off the hook. You know what I mean? And the person would try the phone. And for those that don't know what that means, take the phone off the hook would be like a wall phone. Take the hand thing off, and the person calling would hear beep beep beep, and they couldn't get through to you. That would probably drive some people crazy. I'm just saying. What do you think about all that, Steve?
Well, I'm in agreement too on that. A lot of, you know, every once in a great blue moon, I might be out and about, and I'll come across a payphone, an actual payphone pickup, put your money in, call your. I'm like, oh my word. The funny thing is, my generation, your generation, maybe some millennials would probably know. In fact, that's probably one of the last generations that would, I'm thinking, would know what a payphone is. If you ask anybody of today, 8, 9, 10 years old, who's never seen one, mommy, daddy, what is this?
It's a relic.
It is a relic. And you just speak up and say, well, this is something that, you explain it kindly. This was something that was used many, many years ago, long before we had a cell phone,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, because that would be like the grandpa of this.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you, but I do remember the days of, oh, yeah, you want to talk to me like that? Bam, case closed. I do remember those days. I do remember the beep, 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 beep. Then you got to hang up. call back, keep your fingers crossed, hope you get through. You could be there for 10 minutes. What I would do after about the 4th or 5th try, if no luck, I'd wait about 10 minutes, call back and see what come up.
That's right.
Um, I don't wanna sit there for 10 minutes straight calling. That
Yes.
could be because time is valuable. You could be taking that 10 minutes and do something different.
Right.
So,
And another thing, Steve, getting into the cost. Now I'm going to go back to grandma's time or when my mom was a little girl. Okay.
okay.
My parents were born in the Depression era. Okay. And when they had a telephone growing up in their house, you had to pay per call. Okay. It wasn't
Mhm.
like, oh, you have a flat rated bill. Like a lot of people today complain, oh, my bill is so high. Yeah. Okay. But back in the olden days, you paid per call. And if you were on the phone an hour, well, no such thing. People just didn't do that back then because there was a thing, Steve, called message units.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they would like, tagging on, tagging on. Steve, do you remember this big deal they had? I think it might have been in the mid 80s or early 90s about a nickel a minute for a long distance call on a Sunday. That was like a
I
deal
do
they offered.
I do remember that, and since you mentioned a long distance calling plan, I might as well go one step further. This is one that a lot of people, I'm sure, have forgotten about. And because I'm primarily of that particular era, MCI. Back then, if you wanted to call out and make a phone call, you had to go through a long distance carrier company like that in order to get the reduced rate. Sundays was the best time to make any phone call. I didn't care. It didn't matter where you called from. Sunday got you the better deal. Don't know why. It just right. It was. If I think back, that was a nickel a minute. In today's world, it's probably a quarter a minute. Because cost of living. But I do remember that, and I also, if you want to go one step further, my mom and dad were good about this. Even into the late 90s, 2000s, they used to buy these prepaid phone calling cards.
Yes.
And you would dial that code on the back that you have to scratch off, like you would, and a prepaid card for like a cell phone. And you would punch that in, whatever phone you were using, and then dial the number you're trying to reach. You could use it in the US, you could use it internationally, you could go anywhere with it. And that saved you, that was like 3 cents a minute. I can't remember.
Right. Right.
Um, does that still exist today? I'm not even sure. I don't know.
I don't know. I thought someone mentioned me they were buying a phone card, but maybe it was to fill up their cell phone, like a portable, cell phone for like a service. But I don't think of the same mannerism that you're referring to. Do you remember Steve Beepers, the beeper era?
Yep, I had it.
That was your generation, wasn't it?
Well, let me see. Well, you had beepers in the 80s. I had a beeper before a cell phone. I had a beeper
Right.
90. I had a beeper in the 90s. What was nice about that, if somebody wanted to contact you, you look down, oh, and then all you had to do was find a phone and just call the person back directly.
Yes.
Um,
Well, my daughter is about 5 years younger than you. She was
yeah.
born in 79, you born in 74. But I remember my daughter and her friends, that was like when they were in, grammar school, they wanted pagers. I'm like, what you kids are young. What do you, goodness, green earth, you need a pager for?
Hmm.
So, but that was the style back in the day. All the kids wanted beepers, and I worked for doctors, and I had to page doctors. So for me to think about paging somebody 11 or 10 was, in my mind, I was like, what? Because of the generation I came from. But then
Yeah.
it became very like fashionable. Everybody was paging everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I do remember that the monthly service on a beeper wasn't all that expensive. It was
No,
pretty.
no. No, but it was annoying too, though. Like you talk to somebody, you're in the middle of a personal conversation with them, and that thing would go off as like, oh, let's drop everything, let's check the beeper.
Mhm.
Oh
No,
my word, that was
yeah,
crazy.
I definitely went down that road.
Yeah.
I used to have fun with beepers. Actually, that was a cool time.
Now,
Uh,
in your life, you always had microwaves. I'm thinking because you were born in '74, so in your life, you always had a microwave. Am I correct?
um, well, let me think back. The In our case, let me see, 74. I lived overseas for a few years, came to the States. Um, I don't think we got our first microwave. Oh gosh, it was late. It was 80. It was in the 80s. I
Yeah.
think is when we got our first one. It was a nice one. In fact, I think you and I shared the same microwave. It was a
Yeah, Sharp Carousel too,
right, and it was a
with a convection
convection
of it.
expensive.
Yes. Well, we saw it in the Sharper Image catalog,
Hmm.
and but they lasted forever. They very
Yeah.
durable. I mean,
Well,
I
what
could put the cake in there, switch it over to a microwave. It was great.
Well, what it was is my mom and dad at the time. I'm about to bring back another memory for some people. Um, on one of their off jobs, they worked at Circuit City. Remember them? That was like a Best Buy. In some ways, I kind of thought they were a little better, but that's just me. And because they worked there, they were like doing like custodial work, janitorial cleanup.
Right.
They were given discounts on anything in the store that they bought, like 15% off. So at the time, a new a new Sharp carousel was coming out. What we had, the convection. A new one was coming out, but the old one, because I do this whenever I go to buy something. If there's very little to no difference between one model versus the next,
Right.
I'll choose the outgoing model,
Yes.
and because you'll save money. They want to get rid of that one.
Right.
So we bought it. We got that, and I also got a Sony 20-inch Trinitron TV that lasted me 14 and a half years.
Oh my word! I remember that model TV. They were great.
Yeah, I'm loyal to Sony even to this day, but be prepared. Sony is a little proud of their stuff now.
Yeah.
For some reason, you're going to pay a little bit higher. I don't know why. I mean, Sony is Sony. There's not like it's not like you're buying a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, but
Sony would like to think that they are the cream of the crop. I mean, based on what you were just saying,
yeah.
the Sony is the acronym for So New York. That's where that came from.
Oh, okay. That makes I always wondered that because when you stop and think back,
Yeah.
when you go into Times Square, you've got that
Yeah.
billboard that lights up that changes,
Yes.
and a lot of the time you would see the word Sony pop up
The
there.
jumbotron. Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
So, so New York.
That's what that means. You could, if you wanted to like verify, you could check it. I learned
I
it. I checked
never.
it out one day. I was like, what does this actually stand for? And then I found that that's how that acronym was. Yeah, amazing. But so much is saying, Steve, I'm old enough to remember. This is really scary. Well, let's think about this. I'm old enough to remember. Okay, I'm young, but I'm older. Okay, I'm mentally young. Okay, but I remember, for example, vinyl records, small records, and we went over. Well, you even remember reel to reel, which isn't that behind you? Reel to reel, I
In
think.
fact, those are two of my decks. I have those decks.
Oh my word! So reel to reel records, vinyl records, 4-track, 8-track, cassettes, and then of course we went on to CDs, and then we went on to DVDs, and then we went on to Blu-ray, and then we went on to stream.
Well, there's one reel to reel in that picture that's not posted. It's in a Kai GX747. It's a black one. It's on the net. I don't have it pictured, but there should be three there. But anyway, um, there is one recording. There's a couple of recording mediums you left out. I'll gladly fill it in.
Yeah, fill it
One
in.
one of them you're familiar with, because I think you said you knew of someone that had one. It's called a DAT. It's called a DAT machine.
Yes.
and it's like a little 8 millimeter tape,
Oh,
and you could record CDs. And
yeah,
I literally thought that was going to overtake the reel to reel. I really did. Um,
amazing.
and then you had another. This was cool. I actually thought this was going to overtake the cassette tape. And you guys can look up this information. It's totally free on Google. It's called a mini disc. Mini disc. It's a little plastic. It's not but about yay big, and in the middle you have a little round
Right.
little metal like CD, and it's got a magnetic thing on the side, and all of your music is recorded on that magnetic strip.
Oh, word.
I had one of those. I had a couple of those. They were pretty they were pretty cool. They did make a Walkman version back in the early 90s.
Walkman, yes.
Oh gosh, did I just
Sony Walkman, yes.
oh that goes back, I believe, like the tail end of the 70s.
Yes, yes. Tail end 70s, early 80s. They were like at its height, I think like 81, 82, maybe even
Yeah.
84. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I had a Walkman,
Yeah.
and unfortunately for me, my Walkman didn't come along until later. Um, in fact, I've even got a picture of the Walkman that I had. That's the exact one I had.
Oh, wow. I see it. Oh, wow.
It had an equalizer on it. It had a little Dolby thing on top to cut
It
out
had
some of the
pretty
noise.
good sound to it, if I recall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my parents' other job that they had was working at a store called Service Merchandise. I know a lot of people probably forgot about, and because they worked there, they also got a discount on
I
their.
heard of that name. That's pretty
So
famous.
one year for Christmas, it was right around Christmas. I wanted a Walkman. I had never had one.
Right.
You know, I had cassettes.
Right.
I was always one to record my cassettes rather than buy the pre-recorded. As time went on a little later, I started doing that. I'd record it from the vinyl onto a cassette tape rather than buy the actual I just thought the sound quality was better. But anyway, I got a Walkman. Oh boy, I spent so many hours in that thing, the headphones, just riding around in the back seat of my parents' car, just listening to my music, whatever
Just
I.
like zone out, just listen to your music. Yeah. Yeah.
If I remember, you used to do the same thing.
Of course, I was in 1980s. I was in my 20s, and like, of course, I was teaching at that time. Like in '84, I'd be sitting on the subway. My daughter had her little set, and I had mine.
Yours. Mhm.
Instead of listening to the train, we'd be listening to tunes, which was really good, or the radio, or whatever. But
Mhm.
it was really an amazing thing. My word! Which I want to take you back to a little to a primitive thing, Steve. Did you
Okay.
ever know that on the backs of cereal boxes, the people of a certain age, like maybe my age bracket, sometimes on the backs of cereal boxes, you would cut out the back of it and there was a little bit of a flimsy recording, a record. Do you remember that?
I do. Now, this actually happened to me. I can't remember the brand of cereal. Might have been Captain Crunch or something. I can't recall. But I do remember the on the back you would cut it out, pop it out. There'd be one of I don't know. I may still have it. I don't know. But one of the records that I had Alf on it. ALF, the TV show. Uh, well, anyway, you would play the record and you would listen to like 5 minutes of Alf, blah, 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 just running his mouth. But I do remember those records. Some of those records, if I remember, even had music on them.
Yes. And it was really cool. Steve, do you remember? I keep forgetting the technical name. Remember when, like, on disco records back in maybe the '80s, you were able to buy a very, it wasn't small like a 45, it wasn't full, complete like a big album, but somewhere in the middle was like one song that went on forever and ever and ever, like what that disc was called. Do you remember that?
Okay. They though that became real popular in the 1970s. You had it in the 80s. In
Yeah.
fact, even I like, believe it or not, I actually prefer a 12-inch record. That's what it was
That's it,
called.
12-inch. Yeah,
Yeah, they were used a lot in the discos, the DJs
yeah,
primarily because you need that extra space in the music with no words so
right.
they can mix in their next song. That's what it was originally geared for.
Wow.
I not me. I like listening to an extended version of a song. So
Me too.
but it's
Especially if
called
it's a song I like.
it's called a 12-inch single, 12-inch record. You'd have 2 or 3 versions, and you might have one song that's a little different.
Wow.
Oh, I used to love those. If I couldn't get the 45, I'd do that.
It's
Oh yeah,
incredible.
yeah. But that's primarily used in the disco, like Studio 54, stuff like that, or a disc jockey, right? Because you need that extra time to where, and you're going to have like an instrumental part of the music where the disc jockey can blend in that next song, and that's what that extra space was used for. But a lot of people don't realize that.
Speaking of disco, just for a brief second, if you don't mind, what was that song that you mentioned to me that was actually the really first disco tune and nobody really realizes it?
Well, if you go back to the 70s, it was actually the year I was born. Rock the Boat
Oh,
by the Used Corporation. That was actually considered the very first disco song. But let's go back to 1966 for 1 minute.
that's what I was driving at. I think it was
Were
in
you?
the 60s. Yeah.
Okay. All of you, if you're into Motown, go and listen to "You Keep Me Hanging On" by the Supremes.
Yeah.
If you listen to the song, no, it is not a disco song, but slight disco hint elements is in it. You got to listen for it.
Yes. No,
Um,
I could see that. I'm glad you pointed that out to me one day. I was like, Steve's got a point there.
but you
Wow.
know, I personally believe, but this is just me, that the Motown of the 1960s is what helped lead into the disco, because in the 1970s, then you started getting that Philadelphia sound.
Yeah.
Um, then you had 2 people called Kenneth Gamble and Leon Huff. And they did a lot of stuff like The Sound of Philadelphia, the theme for the Soul Train.
Right.
They did Love Train, I Love Music by the OJs. If you ever see the word Gamble and Huff on a song back in the 70s,
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, it was a good song.
Good song. Wow.
Um, but, you know, but I still believe Motown did play a partial hand in the disco. And then the early 70s when you had,
That's amazing. It
you know,
really is. I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I mean, yes, there are things I do miss, but then again, a part of me is also glad to be in this moment of now where you and I could get together and just have like literally a talk amongst just yourself and myself. And then eventually it goes on the World Wide Web. And that means somebody in London can watch this broadcast. It's amazing.
Mhm. 2 other songs I can tell you that has a disco vibe. One is called Soul Makusa.
Ah, that was one of my favorite tunes. I was in high school when that came out.
Yeah.
I could not wait for the radio to have that on. Oh my word. Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I know I'm humming it. That's got disco elements in it. You gotta listen for it. Let's see. I had one other song
Loved it. That was a great
that
song.
was yeah, that one definitely had oh, the other one that had some disco element to it, you got to go back to 1970. Thank you for letting me be myself
Yeah,
again.
myself.
Fly in the Family Stone. So the disco droplets or little hints was around. They
Yeah.
just didn't put a name to it until about 74 or so.
No, you're right. That's true.
So
Oh my
no,
word. We
because
could go on
everything
forever
had
on this topic, right?
right, because everything's got to come from somewhere. You got to have a foundation
Yeah.
in order to, you know, lift off, quote unquote.
It's
But
true. But I'm not going to lie to you, Steve. Before we go, I do definitely want to mention something. At first, when like, okay, like when I spent my whole high school time, we had to learn like stenography. I took the business elective course back
Mhm.
then. Stenography, so it was so archaic. I mean, learned Greg shorthand, all that stuff. Graduated, and then all of a sudden, like when I wanted to jump right into, like earning money so I could go to broadcasting school. I didn't want to burden my parents for that. They paid enough for my Catholic school growing up. But anyway, so I decided, okay, I'm just going to do this. But what I like resented was that we learned all this archaic stuff in another, in that private high school. And then here I am. It's like all these computers, like with these, remember like that early pioneering computer stuff. Oh, I can't think of that word. Things were on these little weird floppy disk.
Floppy disk.
I was so annoyed that I had to relearn all this stuff, and like, I was. But then, as far as technology, I self-taught to do a lot of.
Well, actually, if you think back to, because as you know, most of Janet. My dad was in the Navy, and about the time he retired in 1981, February 28th. Everything was starting to flip over to the computer. Everything was going computer then. I do know that one of your first computers that ever came out was the Commodore 64.
Right.
And then you did have Mac computers, but unless you had about $2,500, that's on the low side. I'm sure they were probably higher, but you couldn't get your hands on one. They were not a cheap thing at the time.
Now, and then home video games like that, like sort of made everybody a little more comfortable about technology, home video games versus always having to go to the arcade, for example. And
right, that's where you had like the Atari 2600. Since it's my era, I kind of know. I remember.
Yes, that's your era. Yeah,
I didn't have one, but I went over to a lot of friends' house that did. I remember that one. There was one called ColecoVision.
Yes, Coleco. That's right.
Then you had another one called Activision. Then you had the Nintendo a few years later with the gun.
Right, Atari, of course.
The Atari, right.
It was one of the first ones.
Oh, and then later on you had the Segas.
That's right. Yes. Then Nintendo, of course.
Right, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 60. I don't know. What it is they just kept branching off. Atari.
Can I tell you something, Steve? Do you know what I wanted? You might remember this. This was back in the day. You know what I wanted for Mother's Day? And my daughter got it for me that year. Goes to show what my mind was at. You might remember it. It was a home video game, but I used to play it at an arcade.
Which one?
Road Blasters.
Oh, that was a good one. No, that one I did play at the arcade.
Yes.
Oh no, that was a good one. That was
Body Blow.
That was good. You're sitting down and you're driving. And
yeah.
It's kind of like your own version of NASCAR, but you had to watch where you turned.
Oh, it's a fun. Yeah, this was really embarrassing, Steve. About a block away from the school where I taught. Keep in mind, I was in my 20s, so I wasn't always 65. Everybody.
No.
So at that time, it was like middle 80s. I'm in my 20s, okay, and I'm enjoying the games like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
There was like an arcade. Well, actually, it was a regular store, but they had like arcade setup too, as far as tables, coffee, and everything. So my daughter and I used to go to that place before we jumped on the bus and went home. It was a block away from the school. So I'm going like, I'm like the Road Blasters, and you have to keep like a certain decorum when you're a Catholic school teacher. So my students were coming in seeing me like that. I was like, oh my gosh, there they go, seeing me actually act like a real person. It was so awkward.
I could just picture it now. They come in. Oh, hey, teach. I didn't know you like video games.
They're like, now we know.
But you know what?
Teachers like video games too. I mean,
Now, when I was a kid, the way you were about the Road Blaster, I was that way about Pac-Man.
You were.
Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man were my two. No, I don't know about now. It's been so long since I played it, but back then, I think I got up to like level 4 or 5, and you want to talk about keeping because you got to watch those little things that'll eat you, Binky and Pinky and whatever their names were.
Whatever the names were, yes.
You had to watch because they gave you 4 different places you can go out, and if you go out, you can come back in somewhere else.
Yeah.
But your point in that game is you want to eat up those little pellets and not get eaten by one of those critters.
Survival.
So I would go out, come back in. If I had a few over here, I'd go out, come back in, and then I would transfer over to the next. That that does take a lot of mind coordination. You can't take your mind off of that one because you're right there within it. You
True.
know?
True.
So
Steve, how can we forget VCRs? So 1980s.
don't forget the beta.
Yeah, well, beta first, right? It
Beta
wasn't
first, right?
the Betamax
I,
would be VCR. Yeah.
this is just me though. Beta was not the longest living platform or media. I personally thought Beta had a better picture, but that's just me.
Well, Beta wasn't that like the pioneer of
It
it? Like,
was.
yeah. Because I saw a vintage, somebody had given me a vintage, what either was a Life magazine or a magazine called Look, and it was dated 1957. And on the cover, it was projecting that one day, imagine we could record our own TV shows at home. And we lived to see that happen. So that was really weird.
Oh, this is since you mentioned that. My dad read. Was it Popular Science? It was one of those Popular Something magazines back in 1956, and they said the future technology would be down to the thumb, down to your pinky nail.
Yeah.
Did you know that has come true? What do
It's
you
not
think of
true.
what do you,
It's
what do
like
you think?
right here. It's like right here.
That's where that's what I was driving at. The little SD card that you use in your phone.
Yeah.
It's basically that size.
Unbelievable. It's just
Well,
crazy.
actually, I take that back. I meant to say thumbnail, not pinky nail. But no,
Oh, but I got your point. I knew what you meant.
but no. Even with what you read and not what you saw in '57 came true because you did the beta did happen.
Right.
You know.
Two things why I really love the VCR. First of all, it was a fun experience. Like going, let's say it was a rainy Saturday afternoon. I would go, we would go as a family, pick out, remember Blockbuster? Just
Oh
saying,
yeah,
pick out some tapes and stuff like that, late 80s, 90s Blockbuster.
yeah.
And it was fun picking out the tapes, just, watching whatever movies you wanted like that. And one movie, well, Pee-wee's, Adventure, we played that about 100 times.
That was a good movie. As much as I
Never
hate
ending
to say it.
story, all those good stuff, oh my word. It was
No,
fun.
I saw all of the Pee Wee Herman movies. Big
Yeah.
Top Pee Wee, Pee
Yeah.
Wee's Big Adventure, Pee Wee's Playhouse. Oh, boy.
Oh yeah, well. Anyway, know what else was good? It's just jogging a memory for me. When I was teaching, I also always followed a soap opera called All My Children, which I
Mhm.
dearly missed. But when I was teaching, there was no way that I was going to miss the soap. So I would program my VCR, and then like 6, 7 o'clock at night, after the dinner dishes were
Dinner,
done, that was like
yeah.
my hour. I'm like, I am going to watch my soap tonight, and that's it.
That is one advantage that a VCR did have. You could program it to record something when you're not there,
Yeah,
and then you could always go back, rewind the tape, and play it back.
exactly.
They also had DVD recorders that did that later on.
Yes, later on the DVD and or DVR, whatever. Because
Yeah.
back when I was a child, Steve, if you had a favorite TV show that went on once a week, if you missed that show, too bad, so sad. There was no recording. There
No,
was hardly ever reruns until maybe in the summer. If you missed it, tough toenails.
that's right. But I will tell you, and I know this is a God-given fact, when the VCRs came out, even in the early middle '80s, they were $300, $400, $500. They weren't.
No,
They
they
weren't.
weren't cheap initially. They were not cheap for its time. They were not cheap. No.
Guess what I used to do? I'm going to share something with all of you. If anybody has any VCR tapes left lying around, and you have a four-head hi-fi VCR, hi-fi, I used to record music on VCR tape. Get a load of that.
No, wow, that's amazing.
I did it. I did it.
You
I kid
did
you
not.
Believe it or not, the sound quality was not that bad.
I
Imagine
wasn't aware of that capability. That's really cool. I didn't know
if
that.
you remember on a VCR tape, you had 2-hour, 4-hour, and 6-hour recording.
That's true, but I didn't connect the dots about recording music. That's interesting. Wow.
But of course, always try to use the faster recording speed because you got the better sound. That's on
yeah.
any tape machine.
Oh yeah. Much like
But
the way
no.
you listen to my videos, Steve. Like when you put it on that fast auto play thing, or like when
Yeah.
you buzzer and I hear me go, when you played it back if we're on the phone or something. That's
I
like,
sure did. I certainly did. I did record music
thank you
on
for the view anyway. I appreciate it.
yeah. And if anybody that's got a VCR today lying around, for those that do, and any old tapes that try it out. And hook it up to your stereo if you got a receiver or amplifier. Try,
Right.
the sound quality is not that bad.
No.
So anyway, this was a fun conversation talking about old technology.
Old technology versus current technology. I wouldn't trade the current technology for the world. Sometimes
No,
I do think we go slightly overboard with I don't want to say those two letters that begins with letter A and the second letter that ends with I. Sometimes that's to me it's touching upon a little bit of scary stuff, but maybe it's a good thing, but I don't know. But I'm not going to worry about it because I'm already 65.
well, that's true though. Think about it. Years ago, if a friend or somebody, hey, I like that music. Can you make me a copy? You had to record it on a cassette tape or whatnot, however you wanted to do it. These days, hey, I like that song. Hey, turn your Bluetooth on.
It's
Bing,
true.
bing, and you got it.
Ding ding! Right before you and I went to the green room, and you know what I was doing, right? Because you and I were communicating on the phone. What was I listening to? Music. I mean, under normal, and I kept picking all my favorites from any decade, whatever,
Yeah.
randomly, and like my playlist came up on this platform, which I'm so grateful for this platform for so many reasons. You get so much information. You can put out your content. It's just a lot of great stuff. We are so truly blessed today. But there are certain things about yesteryear that I do remember. I'm going to end it on that note. Thanks for having me here, Steve.
You're welcome. But yeah, like I said, these days, if you want certain music from like, hey Steve, do you happen to have Suddenly Last Summer by the Motels? That's a good song, by the way, from the 80s. Yeah, sure. You like it? Yeah. Turn on your Bluetooth. As soon as my phone recognizes your phone, tap, tap, give it about 2 minutes or not even that, and it's on your phone.
It's amazing, and the sound quality is excellent. At least that's been my experience, with that.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, this was a good topic. I hope we were able to, jog people's memory, make you think back, because a lot of this stuff, a lot of people have forgotten. A lot of people, I'm sure, have forgotten about reel to reels. That's another that back then, if you that was probably your best sound quality. If you wanted sound quality, that was the way to go. These days, if you got a reel to reel and you got a lot of tapes left over that are savable, put it on digital media because tape does not hold up. It falls apart.
That's true, Steve. You're right about that. Like transferring it over to keep it alive, keep it going. Yes.
Right. Tape is not. The sound quality was phenomenal,
Right.
but withstanding, nope, the tapes flake and fall apart,
If
unfortunately.
they didn't preserve, for example, things like, let's just say Our Gang Comedy, The Little Rascals, keep in mind, those movies were produced over 100 years ago, or
Years ago.
practically close to it, a whole
I know.
century ago. But if people didn't like constantly update it and refreshen it and preserve it, we wouldn't be able to watch it today.
No. Look at all your TV shows. Like one of the episodes of I Love Lucy from 1956. I look at it.
There you go.
Normally you'd be seeing a lot of scratchy lines, but I look at it and it looks like it just came out today.
Unbelievable.
All of the digital the cleaning up that they had to do for it,
That's right. Yes.
and the remastering. But
Excellent, Steve. Excellent.
All right. Well, keep a lookout for us. I'll probably throw up a video somewhere in between throughout the week. I just gotta figure out a topic to come up with, or to talk about. And
that's why I love this channel. Your channel is very. We could be talking about this one week. We could be talking about Mount Etna. We could another week. We'd be talking about anything. That's what's great. But my channel is mainly about a frugal lifestyle and saving money and other stuff too, and a little bit more than that. So for those of you who've never been to my channel, get over there.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. All right, everybody. I hope everybody has a great whatever time of day that you're in, because I know YouTube is all over. And we'll just see you guys back here next time. I hope you all have a good one.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, Steve, and everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.